Hey guys, I forgot one last thing. I have. So when I was duty free, I'm thinking about these gifts and thinking about what I can get other people. And so when I had the Cuban cigars, I was not thinking of anybody but myself. And I also was not thinking of anybody else when I got this sample of 4 different perfumes from DKNY, and I love these scents, and I am so excited to have a sampler of 4. I am, yeah, they're for me. I'm not going to share. Well, I might share if you're around. So you need to be around in order for me to share. If not, guess you're just gonna miss out on the Aude Kimmy. So this weekend, I think this about sums it up. I think this will be my last video for a while. I think I need to give myself a break. Because I've been doing these back to back. So the weekend afterwards, I did student conferences, and I have 62 or 63 students in my composition 110 class. So not only am I giving, they're on their second paper, I want to give 15 minutes to each student, but then there's also midterms next week, in which there's going to be there's a midterm paper of 5 pages in Intro to Film and another one in Intro to Literature. So some students are writing on 3 different papers about 4 to 5 pages a piece. And student conferences they're tough on the teacher and the students. It's a little bit tough on the students as well. But I was also giving them their first paperback, and a lot of them were having issues with. They're concerned about not being a good writer, and it's virtually the same thing in the United States, where it's not only just their first college paper ever that they're really nervous about, but they're also nervous about their English, they're nervous about the grade. If they do not get a C or above, I think, or a C or above, or a B or above in Composition 110, they have to do something extra with the TOEFL, which is the required English test in order to get into the American university system. The TOEFL is, from what I understand, a test that's a little bit rough. Um, it really pushes how much you know about the English language. I've never seen any sample tests. I don't know how long it takes. I don't know if there's essay versus multiple choice. I don't know any of that. I've only heard from a couple other people what the TOEFL is like. And so the student conferences, I almost died. I had 2 days. I had 4 days of conferences, but when I came back from fall break, I finished grading these papers so fast. But then on Monday, and I put the sign-up sheet on Wednesday, on the week before I left. So the students had Wednesday and Thursday before fall break to sign up. And then I thought, well, I put on dates Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, thinking that should be enough 15-minute segments for 60 students. Some people took 2 times because they have other papers they wanted to discuss. And the one day I got there, and I was doing student conferences from 10 o'clock. I did not leave until 9 o'clock at night, and I went straight. There was a student at my door every moment, practically. And there was a student that was knocking on the door saying, my time is next, or I'm next, but I was so far behind. I got to everybody there, but I was so far behind, and I'm so glad the students were patient with me. I repeated myself, and the students were somewhat demanding. I just was so exhausted, and I was repeating everything. It felt like I was repeating so many things about those goddamn quotation sandwiches. And it was really, I knew that whenever there's one-on-one conferences, you can't go wrong with one-on-one conferences when it comes to students. I benefit from them whenever I have those with my teachers, and I know that they would benefit from that. If anything, just talk about general stuff. But whenever I tried to put 15-minute time, I was always falling behind because I'd never kick the students out of the office. There's always so much more stuff, so I was falling behind. And then the next day, it was, I think, I had class from 9 until 10:30, and then 10:30 until 7. And then that was the Thursday, and we missed the train, and we got into Oslo. We went to Oslo for the weekend, and there was a minding animals pre-conference, a Minding Animals International, and I don't consider myself an animal rights activist. I never really had been involved in a lot of that. I never really was. I was not sure of the vocabulary. I'm not sure about. Um, I'm never really sure about where I stood with that. And there were some people who are considered animal rights activists, and they hate hunters, and they hate taxidermy, they hate farmers and all this stuff. But then they don't know that there's when they say that they never differentiate between the corporate farmers and the individual organic farmers. If it's just farming in general, if it's zoos, I never really thought of it. I never really thought about animal rights or minding animals being there's animal awareness. There's a lot of different people, a lot of different phrases when it comes to that. And the word activist implies something that's dirty, just as feminist, or something that's radical. What is being radical? Being different, trying to instigate change. But really, when there's change that needs to be made, there's always a radical who suggests it first, and then it just kind of takes on. And because my intro to literature and culture class really focuses on social movements, I really want to go to this conference, not only to go to Oslo for the weekend, but and but there was also my coworker who is vegan, who's very into animal activism and animal rights and being concerned about their well-being and welfare. And to see the other side, so to speak, because I've never really been around that. There's always these dirty jokes or these dirty the insinuation that if you're into animal rights, that you're somehow this crazy person, and I don't think that always obviously it's not always the case, and I wanted to know the other side. I never really gave it much thought. So here's this bunch of scholars. So I thought, well, you really can't go wrong with scholars to figure out what it is that they're saying and what's going on in the field. So there's animal rights scholars and not activists. They have a very interesting conversation about corporate farms, how animals have feelings, and maybe not necessarily feelings in the sense of I'm sad, I'm depressed, I'm blue, or knowing, green with envy, or all these different ideas of what we consider to be emotions. And just because they can't articulate it doesn't mean that they don't have them. And because each animal has their own certain personality, it's hard to say that, oh, animals act on instinct. Not always do they act on instinct, and not always are they trained to behave in a certain way. And so when I was talking about the family farm that I come from, we don't vaccinate, we don't calve, we don't do any of that stuff. And I just realized that the farm that we have is very animal friendly. We When we butcher, we don't sit there and let it bleed out. It's very quick and painless for the animal. And I don't think our dog seems to be a very happy-go-lucky person. My baby, Nomar, he was always a happy-go-lucky puppy. I'm always so happy to be on the farm, to be able to roam around and run around and not being in town and being on a leash all the time. And our cats are always fed, taken care of. They can hunt for themselves, to where we're not really hoarders of cats, because there are at times a lot of cats on the farm, but it still ends up to be they're still somewhat self-sufficient. They're not entirely reliant upon us to feed them. They still can feed themselves mice and hunting and such. And there is a way that I didn't even know that there was a difference between fixed or broken about having a pet spayed or neutered. I didn't even know if it's not as if they have the birds and the bees talk or whatever, but it is considered to have a free life, and animals and the freedom to have sex and have babies if they want. But some farmers in the animal kingdom don't care about their kids, and the male cats will eat the young that aren't theirs. So if a cat has kittens by a couple different toms, then she has to defend the kittens from all the toms. So I don't know how that quite fits in with the discussion of fixing your cat, or fixing or breaking your cat, so to speak, and so they don't have the freedom to have sex, which I never thought of. Never thought of. And it still kind of blows my mind. So we were able to talk to Rod Bennison, a person in Guri who works at the University of Oslo as an eco-criminologist. It just sounds like an awesome job title, eco-criminologist. And she had been studying crimes against Earth, crimes against animals, crimes against the whole ecological system, and also against individual animals, or against a group of animals. And she was hosting both my coworker and I, and then his name is Rod Benison. He's CEO of Minding Animals International, and he was talking about in his talk or his paper that was a relatively new paper about how animals are used for sport, racing, fighting. There's camel wrestling, there's cockfights, dog fights, there's horse racing, dog racing, and he was focusing on greyhound racing in particular. And he was giving it a good historical background about why so many breeds. No other animal has been bred into so many different breeds than the dog. Modern greyhound breed in Europe, but they were meant for herding dogs and not meant for racing. But then it turned into um, that they were used for agility, speed, and then the thrill of the chase. And that the attributes, excuse me, are the same now, but they have changed the perception of greyhounds as racing. And so some people are really against um, um, racing, dog racing, because then when the dog is past their prime, they'll just kill it instead of finding a shelter for a racing dog. And so there's this constant, or in case if you're in a area or country that considers dog as food, then the dog then turns into food instead of just killing it. And so it was really interesting to know that the idea of domestication doesn't always mean tame. The idea um, of the dogs and the cattle and whatnot are domesticated, but they still are somewhat wild because we cannot control their actions. We don't understand their connection. When we try and communicate with them, they can understand to a certain extent, but they communicate with us. There's that barrier, there's that boundary between humans and animals, but there's also this weird connection to where sometimes people can just understand and know, based upon experience about being around certain animals. And I really think that farmers have this connection. So there was many seminars. We went out to a couple bars. My coworker and Rod and I went out to a couple bars, and we having this discussion. And sometimes it got into a lively discussion. I'm new to the whole school of thought about animal rights, identity, animal activism, even just animal awareness or animal welfare. I'm fairly new to the vocabulary and the rhetoric and how people frame discussions for certain things. And finally, and then today, um, we there was a movie about a whale named Luna who was in the Lukit Sound in British Columbia, and how there was this concern because because killer whales or orcas are always trying. They are in packs. They are extended families, just like us, and they're very complicated. And it takes more than just, I think, it takes more than just instinct to form those connections between animals, to form those bonds. And so they tend to be very social creatures. Animals, and they're not different from humans in that regard, where they're still very social beings. When I traveled in Europe by myself, that there was to have that interaction of ordering something or trying to communicate, it alleviated some stress when somebody understood me. And I always was looking for that travel partner or somebody, wondering if there was ever a chance where I could get that travel partner. And so the story of Luna, it's a documentary. It's either called The Whale or Saving Luna. I can't remember. Um, we watched it just this morning, and it really made an impact because people were concerned whether this whale would get hit by propellers. And so while the whale was bonding with people on the boats because it had no other family, somehow it had gotten into the sound and there was no other family around, and it was just a very young whale, and was looking for that companionship. But that very companionship was harmful because when that whale would come up to the boats, there could be potential damage from the propellers, from people. If the whale was playing and hit some prop or something on the boat, somebody just might up and shoot it. It was very interesting, this animal conference.